Today's podcast is sponsored by Grappa Restaurant, 22 Railroad Avenue, Warwick, New York. We have outdoor seating, indoor seating, upstairs bar, fantastic food and ambience. Come join us, Grappa Restaurant. I'm back. I took a little layoff, so people are wondering why. I was doing a movie called Pony that'll be out shortly. We just started filming, so I've been a little busy and I'll be traveling again. So I just got back in studio. Welcome back. For the people that don't know me, I'm John Alite, and I'm going to talk today about a very famous gangster and powerful, not Italian, and he's German. His name's Joe Watts. He just recently came home from prison. He's on parole, and he had a big name in the mob with Paul Castellano, and later on he had the connection with the Westies. He was the intermediary for Paul, and then later on with John Gotti Sr. So let me dive into it. And these are, I'm not saying is facts. This is what was said in the mob world, and you make your own judgment. I just tell it how it is, and I try to be as honest as possible about whoever I'm talking about. Whether you like the person, don't like the person, you can form your own opinion on what I'm going to say. So let's start. Joe Watts became very close with John Gotti Sr. after Paul gets killed. But at the time, John Gotti Jr. Didn't really like Paul, Joe. Didn't have a great feeling about Danny Marino, and in the paperwork he discusses that, Jr. Now, people are going to be surprised what I'm going to say here. So I'm going to speak up a little bit for Junior Gotti. And I'm not justifying anything that went on in his life or anybody else's life. I'm just going to stick to the facts. Junior had his back against the wall, and he accused these guys of being informants, CIs. Well, not these guys. He accuses Joe Watts of being a CI. Now, factually, what I know is years ago during one of the commission meetings in South Beach, Staten Island, there was paperwork on a CI that set up a video and surveillance at that meeting. And they said the guy's handler's name was the German. Now, that doesn't mean it had to be Joe Watts. So let's get that straight. But that's what the paperwork said. Later on in 1997, I was in prison with Jeannie Gotti, Joe Gambino, and they sent paperwork in again. Saying that Joe Watts was a CI. Now this time they straight out say his name, and he's accused by the Gambino family of being a CI. Now, do I know that? No. Do they accuse people constantly of being CIs? Yes. For the historians, do guys in the mob throughout history work with the FBI and law enforcement? Sure. Whitey Bulger's one. Greg Scarpa Sr. is 2. Later on, Gaspipe with Caracappa and Toledo. This is what goes on in the mob world. For the naive people that think it doesn't, it does. So when we go back in 1997, they were all huddled up, they were talking, and they were accusing Joe of being an informant. Later on, Nicky Carrazzo, very powerful skipper that got involved in moving up the ladder and taking over the family. There was a move for him taking over the family and get involved on the panel. His brother was concierge of the family, Jojo. They had a meeting down in Court Street area, and they called Joe Watts in. To Joe Watts' credit, he is a tough guy. I know a lot about Joe since I was a kid. I heard John Sr. talk about him. He liked him. He was a moneymaker. He had Fat Don Borghese around him that would speak up for him. They straightened him out as a favor to Joe so he can use him at sit-downs. Fat Don ends up going bad and cooperating. And Joe continued on his path as a well-known gangster through all the families, through 5 families. But John Gotti Jr. Believed that he was still working. And in those 302s, he discusses that and says that he believed that he was an informant. Now, some of the paperwork on the murder of Weiss, he went to prison on, a load of guys did, on conspiracy to murder for Weiss. Joe Watts was one of the guys that got convicted or pled out to that, I'm not sure, but I think he got about 12 years for that case. He did a couple other bids with 2 years, 3 years, 1 year, small bids. So he's done some time for sure. He lived in prison as one of the cellmates was Joe Kane, one of the guys that grew up with me. Later on, I ended up robbing him a couple times, stabbing him, but I also shot guys from Salinota's brother-in-law I shot from, and baseball batted the kid Keegan for him, and I chased the guy from Gooch back to Italy that shot him. So the involvement of these guys, I know them all for a lot of years. The mob has changed. Years ago, you're responsible for who you bring around. And again, we'll talk about Danny Marino, why John Gotti Jr. felt this way. In 1998, Gotti brought a couple of agents to see his father in MCC, I believe it was MTC, but it was MCC, I believe. And he tried to, it doesn't matter what prison he was in, he brought the FBI to him. And he was trying to discuss, I guess, the jam he was in with these guys and other guys. Right prior to that, a couple years prior to that, Gas Pipe was planning on killing Gotti Jr. Guys were cooperating against him, Mikey Scars and a load of other guys. And that same year, 1998, they picked me up off the compound in Allenwood. I was there with a load of gangsters. The DiNapoli brothers, Vinny and Joe. Vinny's passed since then. I don't know if Joe's still alive. Kevin Granada, Ronnie Turch. There was guys from every family there at the time. They picked me up and put me in a hole for no reason. At that time, we hired lawyers to find out why, after that meeting, did I go to the hole. The answer back from the Bureau of Prisons was they can't give an answer if it's internal or external. It undermines the investigation. As time went on, there was several rumors about several guys, and it continued. And they set a meeting down, like I was saying, at Court Street later on, and Joe Watts went to the meeting. Nicky Carrazzo ran that meeting. He had Mike Gennady down there with several guys, and Joe walked in, to his credit, alone. He answered the questions that were asked of him, and he walked out, obviously. So he passed the smell test of whatever questions were asked. Now, he won't be the first guy accused of it, and there's still guys out there that say, talk against him, and that's part of the mob world. What's accurate, what is it? You judge. For me, I have nothing against Joe. I have nothing against Danny Marino. But if you go back to the days of Sonny Black, when you bring guys around, you're responsible for those guys. And that's where I get into the relationship between Danny Marino and Joe Watts. Danny Marino okayed a guy, Charlie Ray, to us. That was his cellmate for a lot of years. And his cellmate came in and brought agents in to Allenwood. War Wires brought a woman in that was an agent. And the whole compound was locked up and put in solitary confinement under investigation for a slew of different crimes. Danny Marino okayed that guy. Charlie Ray also tried to get me to do business in Kentucky with agents that were undercover that worked with politicians for a transfer station and a dump. His stepmom actually tipped me and said that they're going to try to set me up. Now, I came home from prison, from the solitary confinement, and a second case, we all got hit with another case for bribery and a slew of different crimes, different guys, different organizations, whether the Lucchese family, Genovese family, we all got hit. And it all stemmed from Charlie Ray. But the next question was, Danny Marino brought him around. Why didn't this guy try to set up Danny Marino if he was his cellmate for several years? Why wasn't there any 302s or any kind of attempt to set him up. That's another question. Now, again, in the old days, you're held responsible for who you bring around, and he was never held responsible for dozens of guys being arrested. And I've said it in the past. There's rules, and that was one of the rules. They changed that rule. The other rule was allocuting to a position or allocuting to the existence of the mafia. And I go by my rules because these guys go by their own rules, and I'll go by my rules. My rules is if somebody screws you over or fucks you over, then you owe them nothing. Loyalty deserves loyalty. Now, he also, since then, they straightened out his son. Now, I don't know his son. He could be a nice kid. I heard he's a nice kid. But he's not a gangster. These guys aren't gangsters. This is not what, when you're watching a movie or you grew up and you're watching, whether it's Al Capone or you're watching Donnie Brasco or, you're watching Sonny Black. Those are the gangsters that people are used to watching. These guys are rich kids that are put in positions because their fathers had a position. And, for the people that don't understand the mob, that's why I don't have the same respect I did years ago. Now, people ask me, what do you think of the mob today? And everybody has I mind my business. I have nothing against any of these guys. But when these guys are throwing rocks or talking, we all have stories. We all have information. And the people that are naive, you can believe what you want. The people that are historians understand what I'm talking about. People that are involved in the street know what those rumors were, that paperwork I'm talking about, going all the way back to the 80s. And going back to John Jr., I think he made the mistake of having the falling out with me. He had the position, I had the power. And the two of us at that time had the ability, because of my violent nature and the guys I had around me that were violent, and he had the ability to use us when he wanted. I think that was his mistake, and he cornered himself in no man's land. And again, I'm not justifying anything about him. It's just part of the life. This is what goes on. So the people that don't think or think what I'm saying is accurate, you got to ask guys that were in the Colombo family after the war. Everybody cooperated. You got to ask Vinny Gorgeous. He's in prison. Well, his whole regime cooperated, and the boss wore a wire. Joe Messina. This is the reality of the street world. Everybody has alliances with each other. They have alliances with law enforcement, and they make the decisions best for their life. So when you hear what I'm saying and you think that, it's true, then you can dig into it. If you think it's not, that's also your opinion. If somebody asks me, do I like Joe Watts? Yeah, I always liked Joe Watts. I was a kid. I hung around. I respected the guy. These guys who were all 80 years old, and the mob's not what it was back in the day. Back in the day, there were certain guys. I'm very honest about the guys I talk about, and I've said it over and over again. There were guys like me who didn't care about guys' positions. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes the guys in the mob make. They're naive, and they get complacent. It's kind of like law enforcement. 90% of the people, when they get pulled over by a cop, they comply. Same in the mob. 90% of the people, 95% of the people comply if they hear the guy's a gangster. Then there's the 5 to 10%. Guys like myself, guys like Vito Guzzo in the past, guys like Robert Ingalls. We didn't care. If somebody crossed us, then we'd worry about those guys afterwards. Guys like us, Lee Whitley, who's from Canada, was with me when Ali Calabrese believed, because he was in prison, he was around the boss, Tommy of Ohio, nice guy, gentleman, that he was going to get some leeway. Gangster, the guy was definitely a gangster, and we heard him bad. These are the things that happen when guys don't understand. There's certain guys out there that we don't care who they know, where they know. If they're in the wrong, we're going to do what we believe that should be done, and then we'll deal with whoever they think they're friends with. Years ago, my cousin, Nicky, was around Rossi, the skipper from The Genovese family, nice guy. I spoke to him on the telephone, and I told him nothing against you, which he was involved with the bread unions. My cousin worked for him, and my cousin owed me money, disrespected me, threw out names. And the next day I shot him up and pistol whipped him on a July 3rd day, and he ended up without any leg. So, well, he lost one of his legs, I believe. The other one was saved. And you know, this is what goes on for the naive guys that think that they can reach out to somebody and somebody cares. If you got a serious guy out there like Vito when they thought they killed his father, and this is, we were doing this back in the day when guys weren't killing guys. In the 80s that were wise guys, but we didn't care back then. Now it's a different era. And you have different guys that we went after over the years that ran to somebody and they paid the price for running to them. There were guys like Stevie New was on my show. He ran and he threw out Agnello's name and I shot him. You had bookmaker Napolitano, cousin Bobby, that was around the captain of the Panano family and Ronnie One-On. And I beat him pretty bad. Big guy, 6'5", 6'6", 300-something pounds for the guys that know him. I had Johnny Burke wait on the side of the building when I did it. And beat him with my hands, tied him up, and put my name and put it in his mouth. So, you know, when guys are running and thinking guys are going to save them because they're throwing out their name, they're wrong. The history of the mob will tell you there's a lot of guys that end up hurt very badly or killed for taking liberties and thinking somebody's going to protect them. It's just not going to happen. And getting back to Joe Watts and the history of the Gambino family, where it stands today, Joe was a very powerful guy. Joe was well respected. But at one time, there was a lot of guys well respected that later on things came out on, and along with Gaspipe. When Gaspipe was cooperating, he had the cops doing the hits for him at Polito and Caracappa. You know, people were accusing Vicar Musa. Did he know what Gaspipe was doing? And I'm not talking about what the police later on when he was cooperating. And these answers we'll never know for sure. But this is part of the treachery of the mob world and why I'm not involved in it. I walked away from it. But our DNA is always the same. And any of us that were in that life and know any of us know that we're never going to let somebody take advantage of us. If you like this, please hit subscribe, write comments, questions, and hope to see you soon on the next show. I hope you liked the information and what I had to say. Thank you, everybody. Until next week.